All right, welcome into this week's Panther-Lair podcast as we're here on a Tuesday night for the live stream, Wednesday morning for everyone to hear. And we do our regular thing here. We get together every Tuesday night for this hour or so of Pitt sports talk. If you don't check out the live stream, you really should. If you listen to the podcast every week, you just check it out when it comes into your iTunes or however it is that you listen to the podcast. If you just listen, that's cool. I appreciate that. I'm glad you're checking it out. But you should definitely tune in every now and then to the Tuesday night live stream because I think we've got a pretty interesting thing going every Tuesday night at 8:30. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Laircom, Panther-Lair.com, one word. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's fun. We sit down and just start talking about whatever's going on in the world of Pitt sports or whatever's going on in, general around Pitt topics, whatever we can come up with. And certainly we've gotten into some interesting areas and territory over the past few months, but then we also have the opportunity to interact. And I always say this is one of the most fun things about doing this live stream. It's really why I started doing the live stream, was to get more interaction. Instead of just having the regular podcast that you listen to and it's just me talking, we can come here with the comment section on the live stream and people can be in there and posting comments, saying hello, asking their questions, posting reactions, and I think it works out pretty well. I talk for a little bit, then we go to the questions, we have a little conversation, a little back and forth. So if you ever listen to the podcast, if you've been listening for a long time and you say, I'd just like to tell him what a moron he is, here's your chance to tell me what a moron I am. And I look forward to that feedback. Or if you have a question, say, wait, you said this, or hey, what about that? Well, this is our chance to talk about it. So it's fun. You watch the video if you want. That's exciting, I suppose, if you like to check out this mug. But you can go in there and interact. And I think that's really what's fun about it. That's why we started doing these live stream videos. So if you like the podcast, I'd really appreciate it. Make sure you check out the live stream Tuesday nights at 8:30 every week. And of course, Fridays we have the Conversation podcast and Gus Mustakas on the podcast last week. We're bringing out the heavy hitters now. Gus was great. He might be not the first player you think of in Pitt's 2005 recruiting class or on those teams from 2005 through 2009, but he was a guy who played a lot. He was a contributor. He's a great guy, and he had a lot of fun stories about that period of time, 2005 to 2009. And so if you have memories of that time, and even if you don't, it's a good chance to kind of catch up on some things and get a sense of what was going on and what it was like for the players in those years. Because, 2005, 2006, 2007, really up until the 13-9 games, some pretty lean seasons for Pitt football. 2008 and 2009, of course, they win 19 games and fall short a little bit of the Big East title each of those years, but still achieved quite a bit of success. Most success in, 30 years or so. And so Gus had some great memories about that, some great memories about those teams. And, of course, he also compared that 2009 defensive line, which was really good, to this 2020 defensive line, which should be pretty good and probably just might end up being better. I don't know, man. 2009, you have Greg Romeus and Jabal Sheard at defensive end. You have Gus and Mick Williams at defensive tackle. Probably going to give the edge to this year's group, but we'll see how they actually perform. They have to go out and be better. And you can make a case that they were maybe even better last year than the 2009 team was, or the 2009 defensive line. But we'll see what they do on the field this year. But Gus had some great comments about that because he still follows Pitt closely. He still watches the team and he's familiar with the players. And so he was great. If you didn't get a chance to check that podcast out, Conversation Podcast, go back and look at that from last week and all the Conversation podcasts we've had. I've really enjoyed all the conversations. I've enjoyed the interviews they produced, and I think we've gotten some great feedback. People have enjoyed listening to them. This week, shaping up to be an interesting one. I hate to tease things. Not even tease. I don't like to tease things. That's not really my style. I don't like to sit here and tell you about things that I know that you don't know or something like that. It's just I've never gotten into that. I can't say I've never done it. I've probably done it once or twice or maybe even more over the last 15 years. But it's just not really I'm just not wired that way. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to sit here and give out teases, and I also don't like to hype up things that haven't happened yet. So this week's interview, got it tentatively scheduled. Hope it all gets pulled up because I've had interviews in the past that have been tentatively scheduled and they didn't come to fruition. So I don't want to jinx it by talking about who it is, and I like to just let it fly, and when it happens, it happens. So hopefully this week's interview comes together, because I think it's going to be pretty interesting. I think there's some interesting stories to be told on this week's podcast, and hopefully more than just a one-hit wonder, which it's got a possibility of being. So we'll see what comes out on Friday. It might only be like a 10-minute podcast as opposed to the half-hour conversations we've been having recently with some of these guests like Gus Mustakas or EJ Borghetti, which that one went like 45 minutes. You got to check that podcast out. But anyway, I'm a big fan of these conversation podcasts. I enjoy doing them. I think they produce some really interesting conversations, and hopefully you've got a chance to listen to them, and hopefully you enjoy them as well. And then last thing, we always got to plug Saturday morning, 8:30 a.m. on 93.7 The Fan, the Panthers Insider Show. Make sure you check that out. It's kind of like this podcast, but without the interaction of the comments. But it's also on the radio, so you can listen to it while you're driving around. You can tune the dial to 93.7 and check that out, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. We get a little hour of Pitt Sports Talk. And I'm guessing that when we sit down for that hour of Pitt Sports Talk this Saturday morning at 8 a.m. on 93.7 The Fan, probably going to talk a little recruiting. Certainly been talking a lot of recruiting on the Panthers Insider Show, here on the Panther-Lair podcast, on Panther-Lair.com, on the message boards, and the 321 column, and all over the place, because that's the main thing that's going on right now is recruiting. So we've been talking a lot about that. But there's some recruiting news this week. This is not a test, folks. I'm not making this up. This is not some kind of War of the Worlds thing. Don't assume that this is a satire. This is not fake. This is real. Pitt got a tight end commitment. It happened. And they had to go across the country to get it, but they got it. Trey Anderson, a name that sounds familiar because he was a quarterback at Pitt back in 2011 through 2013 or so. I forget, 2013, 2014. Todd Graham recruit. Came as a walk-on, went on scholarship, ended up sticking around for a couple years of Paul Chryst. That's not who we're talking about. He's a coach at Arizona State now. We are talking about Trey Anderson with an E, Andersen. He's a tight end from Utah. Not a quarterback from Texas. And he's not going to be coming in as a walk-on. He's coming in on scholarship because he is a scholarship player. As you see, if you're watching the live stream, right up there at the top, the very top headline, the path to Pitt for new tight end commit Anderson. And then right below that, Pitt lands Trey Anderson. He committed on Tuesday. Perfect timing because Pat Narduzzi tweeted out a commitment Tuesday afternoon. And the initial word I was getting is that the recruit wasn't going to announce it until Wednesday. And so I thought, oh, great. We're going to spend the podcast on Tuesday talking about how there's a commitment, but we don't know who it is, or it hasn't been announced yet. And then that podcast will be irrelevant a day later when the kid actually does announce it. Well, fortunately for us, Trey Anderson announced his commitment on Tuesday and put it out there that he was committing to Pitt. And you always, every year in recruiting, there are interesting stories. We may have found the one for the 2021 recruiting class now with Trey Anderson. He's from Utah, and he graduated high school in 2019. You probably know his story. If you don't, we're going to recap it. So he graduates high school in 2019, and a week later, he goes to California on a mission trip. He was committed to BYU, delayed college, and went on a mission trip where he's still at. He's in California right now serving a mission trip that will go through November. When he's done in November, he'll go back to Utah and where his family lives, and then take an official visit to Pitt, sign his letter of intent in December, enroll at Pitt in January as like a 20-year-old freshman with 5 years of eligibility, 5 years to play for, as they say. 4 years of eligibility plus a redshirt year. So there's a lot to unpack in that situation. And you could start with just the simple question of how the heck did they find this guy? How do you find a kid from Utah who's living in California who hasn't been playing football for the last year and a half? How do you find that? Well, there's a funny story, and we put that in the article, and you really should go to Panther-Lair.com and read the article. The Path to Pitt for New Tight End Commit Anderson is the headline. It's a free article. You don't even have to be a subscriber. We always do that with the commitment articles. Put them out there for free. Let everybody read about the new commits. And you read that article, and you can get the whole story. And sort of the shortest version of the story that I can come up with is Trey Anderson's dad, Jason Anderson, played in the NFL and then was a college coach and then went into the high school coaching ranks, 7 years in the NFL or so. I'm not making this the shortest version now by adding that detail. But anyway, he goes to the coaches convention in Nashville in January, runs into his old buddy Joe Germain, who was a quarterback at Ohio State in the late 1990s. They both played together for the Chiefs in the early 2000s for a year or so. And when he runs into his old buddy Joe Germain, his old buddy Joe Germain is talking to his old quarterbacks coach at Ohio State, Tim Salem. You see the connection now. Germain introduces Jason Anderson to Tim Salem. Anderson asks Salem, what do you coach at Pitt? Salem says tight ends. Anderson says, well, isn't that funny? My son is a tight end. Bada bing, bada boom. You see, step by step by step. You can imagine where it went from there. They exchange contact info. Salem checks out the highlight tape. They watch everything they can on this kid. They find out everything they can about Trey Anderson. While he's been in California, he worked out as much as he could. He also made video of himself running routes, catching passes from not Division I quarterbacks, let's say. His companions on the mission trip would throw him passes as he ran certain routes, and the passes were not always on target, which actually demonstrated his catching ability a little bit. So eventually Pitt liked what they saw, and last week they offered a scholarship, and by that point, the relationship was strong enough, the interest level was high enough that Trey Anderson, he waited about 5 days after getting the offer, but not very long, and quite frankly, given the way communication is, where Trey Anderson's allowed to make one phone call per week, and that's on Mondays. He doesn't have access to Twitter. You see his Twitter account that's out there. That's operated by his father, because as part of his mission trip, he doesn't have access to Twitter. He's able to use Facebook, and he's able to send messages through Facebook, and he's able to use video calls on Facebook. So he's had some face-to-face over video conversations with Pat Narduzzi and Tim Salem and the rest. And he's seen sort of a virtual tour of sorts. But that's about it. But he liked what he saw. He loved what he saw. His dad said it was his dream school. He said he fell in love with Pitt. And 5 days later, he commits. And now Pitt has a tight end in the class. And, first things last, let's talk about who he is or how he is as a player. 6'6", 250 pounds, maybe even a little bit taller. His dad told me he was 6'6" when he graduated from high school, but he very well may be a little bit taller than that now because it's 2 years later and guys do keep growing. He can move a little bit. He caught passes when he played in high school. There's obviously a bit of a question when a guy has been out of the game for this long. I'm sure he's been doing everything he can to stay in shape. When he was able to go to the gym, he did. When he hasn't been able to go to the gym, he's been running and doing body weight exercises and that kind of thing. And he's an intriguing guy. He's an intriguing athlete. He's a big jumbo athlete, but a guy who seems like he can move well enough that he should be able to avoid, if he wants, that move to the offensive tackle that you sort of immediately assume when you see a guy who's 6'6", 6'7", 250 pounds. Say that guy's going to add 30 pounds and he's going to move to tackle. Well, I don't think that's a guarantee when it comes to Trey Anderson, and I don't even know if it's really on the table right now. It's probably something that's always getting considered because if you have a tight end who can't cut it at tight end, or you have a needed offensive tackle, which was the case with Brian O'Neill. It's the case with Grant Kerrigan to some extent this year. It's something you always have to consider as a possibility. But Trey Anderson looks like a tight end, and he's the first tight end for Pitt in this class. And for as much as we've talked about tight end, I sort of expected the heavens to open and the choir of angels to shout out when Pitt got a tight end commitment. That didn't quite happen, but look, it's news, and it's positive news because Pitt landed a tight end. And we've spent a lot of time talking about the issues here. And we've talked about why Pitt hasn't been able to get tight ends more consistently and with better quality. We've talked about why Pitt has had to take a graduate transfer tight end in each of the last 4 recruiting classes. Is that right? They took Matt Flanagan in 17, Will Gragg in 18, Nakia Griffin-Stewart in 19, and then Lucas Kroll this year. We've covered all of these issues. We've talked about the tight end problem for a long time. Well, I'm not going to say that Trey Anderson solves the problem, but he's certainly part of the solution. He looks like part of the solution. And as far as this 2021 recruiting class goes, he's going to be part of the solution. I'm still of the mind that they'll try and get a second tight end in this class, and I think they probably should. I think the depth on the roster merits taking a second tight end. I think the fact that they have such a big recruiting class lined up. This is 18 commitments right now with Anderson on board, and they're not going to, I don't see them slowing down. I don't see them taking less than, at least 5 more. if not 6 more, if not 7 more. I mean, this is going to be a big class. I've said that for a long time now. I mean, we've been talking about this as being a sizable class. And so they've got room to take 2 tight ends. They've got room to take 3 or 4 cornerbacks. They've got room to take 4, they already have 4 offensive line commitments. They've got room to take a 5th offensive line commitment. They've got room to take more defensive linemen. They've got a handful already committed, but they've got room to take more because it's a big class. And then still add on that 1 or 2, late cycle can't miss guy, or the guy who kind of comes available, the Rashad Weaver, to turn the clock back a ways, or the Rashad Battle a little more recently, or the Keyshawn Camp a little more recently. Well, no, actually, Camp was in the same class as Weaver, so to turn the clock back. But I mean, those guys who come available late in the process. You're not going to have them every year. You have to have certain circumstances work out for you, but they should have room for that kind of guy, 1 or 2 of them, when you get to January and you see who's still out there after the December signing period. So, I guess one thing that sticks out about this, and I kind of said something about this on the message board the other day about Tim Salem, because Tim Salem takes a lot of flack, from the fans, because Pitt has struggled to recruit tight ends, and the play at the tight end position hasn't been very good basically since 2016. I mean, Flanagan wasn't anything special. Chris Clark never really was consistent enough. Will Gragg never developed. Nakia Griffin-Stewart dropped too many passes. You really have a huge drop-off since Scott Orndorff and J.P. Holtz that they haven't been able to recover for. And Tim Salem's been the tight ends coach throughout that entire time, which inevitably he's going to take some of the blame. I don't think he deserves all the blame, but he certainly deserves some of it. I mean, it's his position. And we've talked about recruiting, how you don't just have the position coaches recruiting certain positions. The position coaches are involved with all the recruits at their position, but you've also got geographic areas. So Charlie Partridge, of course, recruits the defensive line, but he also coaches the defensive line, so he's involved with defensive line recruits, but he also recruits South Florida. That's where his contacts are. That's where his connections are. Chris Beatty coaches the wide receivers, but he's also the main guy for Trevion Stevenson, who's a defensive lineman, or Malik Newton, who's a running back. So it spreads out a little bit, and it puts more coaches in touch with more recruits. It creates more points of contact for each recruit. If you have the position coach, the area coach, and then sometimes you'll get the recruiter involved or the head coach involved. So you have multiple, like I say, points of contact. It's a recruiting strategy, and most schools do this. This is not something unique to Pitt. And in that regard, I mean, Salem has done pretty well with recruiting North Jersey, New York, New England, junior college, kind of. He sort of scatters all over the country to some extent. Central Florida, a little bit. I mean, he's had the Orlando area, and he's done well. And I think he's generally pretty well respected as a recruiter. I think he's known for being pretty good as a recruiter, but for some reason his position has just lagged. And again, that's not entirely on him, but he does take some of the credit. It's funny when you look at this 2021 recruiting class. I mean, Pitt just got a tight end commitment, so we're going to focus on the guy they got. We don't want to dwell on the guys they haven't gotten, but it sort of sums up Pitt's luck that they're after a bunch of these guys. They've got a good chance with these guys. Well, here's one tight end who commits to a different school to play basketball, so that guy goes off the board. There's another guy who is graduates high school and he's going to do a prep year, and he likes Pitt a lot, and they've got a really good chance of landing him at the end of this prep year. But now he's a little uncertain about what the fall is going to look like. He doesn't want to go to the prep school and have something happen to his season and basically just waste a year there if the season gets canceled or part of it gets canceled or postponed or whatever. And so he makes a last-minute decision to, instead of going to the prep school, he signs a letter of intent in like June, or signs a financial aid agreement or whatever, and goes to college at like Louisiana Monroe or wherever it is. Such is Pitt's luck. Now, I mean, you make your own luck, but that's some bad luck. when two guys you're after, one guy goes to college for basketball and the other one decides to go to college right now. And I think if Pitt had room, they would have taken him, but their scholarship's full. Their roster is full. They have 85 scholarship players right now. So unless there's going to be another instance of attrition, and at this point it doesn't look like there will be, at least not before you get to August in training camp, you aren't going to have room for that kid. And I think he did want to come here. I think it's Rhett Guidry, I believe is his name. Kid from Louisiana who was going to go to a prep school in South Carolina, but ended up just sticking around, staying closer to home, staying in state because it was a school he could go to. I think he would have gone to Pitt if they had room for him, but they didn't have room. It's such is Pitt's luck with tight ends. But what's funny is you've got the most energetic coach on the staff, a guy who is more of a tireless worker than anybody else in the staff. And I don't think they have lazy guys on this staff. I think all these guys work pretty hard. Tim Salem, I think, outworks all of them and literally will leave no stone unturned. And in this situation with Trey Anderson, he kind of got lucky, of just being in the right place at the right time. He's talking to Joe Germain at the same time that Jason Anderson walks up and introduces himself. That's good luck. That's a story that we're going to tell a bunch of times, certainly between now and when Trey Anderson actually gets on the field. And if he gets on the field and has success, then we'll tell that story even more about how he went on a mission trip and was out of football for 2 years and couldn't wait to get back. And his dad met Tim Salem randomly at a coaches convention in Nashville. It's a great story. We'll see where it leads. Let's see. I want to get to the questions here, get to the comments. The other thing I want to say about tight ends, though, before we get into some of your comments and some of your thoughts here on the live stream, and I appreciate everybody who's jumped in so far. I think the tight end position is going to take a positive turn this year. And there's a lot of reasons why I think that. I think you can look at Pitt's running game and question the desire and the commitment. Mark Whipple likes to throw the ball. I think he knows he needs to run the ball better than he did. I think he knows Pitt needs to run the ball better than it did in 2019. But he's also a pass-heavy coordinator. Now, at UMass, they were losing games a lot, so they had to throw the ball a ton. Last year, you can make a case that they just couldn't run the ball very well, so the best decision, the decision, the best interest, if you had the offensive success, the best interest of the offense in mind, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and I don't know why I needed to try that 4 times to get the right phrase. If you have the best interest of the offense in mind, you wanted to give the offense the best chance of success. You can make a case that throwing it was your best bet. Simply because they couldn't run very well. The running backs weren't very good. The offensive line wasn't very good at run blocking. Compared to 2018 where they were really good at run blocking, and the pass blocking maybe suffered a little bit. I think they were a little better at pass blocking last year than they had been in 2018. But the run blocking took a big steep dive. And so you could say you could question Mark Whipple's commitment to the running game. And you can understand why to some extent because it wasn't very good. But, I think we had this conversation during the season, and certainly we've talked about it a lot after the season, of whether or not, what was the bigger problem? Was it an inability to run or a lack of desire to run? And I'm going to side with the former. I'm going to say it was an inability to run well and run effectively. But I'm not going to deny that I think there was an issue with desire and an issue with commitment. And I think one of the big focal points this offseason really needed to be reestablishing that focus on the running game and that commitment to the running game. And we'll see the product of those efforts and that focus this season. And my point is, you could question Mark Whipple's commitment to the running game. And I say that as a picture of Mark Whipple comes on the screen. It's good timing by me. If you're watching the live stream, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There he is. You could question Mark Whipple's commitment to the running game. You don't have the same questions about his commitment to getting the ball to the tight ends. There's history of it when you look at UMass and what he did, particularly with Adam Brenham in there. When a tight end was one of the better playmakers on the roster, the tight end got the ball a lot, 60, 70 passes. Catches, not targets, catches. So he can force the ball to guys if they deserve it, if they merit it. And if that's a tight end that merits a lot of passes coming his way, Mark Whipple will get the ball to the tight end. I don't question his commitment there. The problem last year, the problem with the lack of production out of the tight ends wasn't one of Mark Whipple's desire to throw to the tight ends. It was a product of the tight ends not being very good. Tight ends not catching well enough and not doing what they were supposed to do in a number of different instances. All of this is a long path of getting around to saying that I think this year with Lucas Kroll, who I think is the best grad transfer tight end they have brought in, and has the potential to be the best grad transfer tight end they have brought in, I think this year you're going to see some of those efforts pay off. I think Kroll can have a really big season for Pitt this year. I think he can catch a lot of passes. I don't know what number, 40, 50, 30. I don't know what the number is. I think he can catch enough passes that you say, look at it and say definitively that was the best performance by a tight end since Scott Orndorff in 2016. And if all goes as planned, if he really does live up to his billing, if he lives up to the ability that he seems to have and that people at Pitt have told us he has, I think he can surpass what Orndorff did in 2016. I mean, it's not like Orndorff caught 50 passes or 60 passes in 2016, but he was pretty good. I think Kroll can top that. I think he's got the ability. He's got the size. He's got soft hands, and he can run well. He'll be a better pass catcher than the last two guys. The guys you saw last year, Will Gregg and Nakia Griffin-Stewart. And I think he runs well for his size. He should be a matchup problem against almost anybody because of his size, simply because of his size. And I think he can run well enough that it's not just a matter of him being taller than everyone. I'm really bullish on what Lucas Kroll is going to be able to deliver for the offense this year and how that's going to impact not just the performance of the tight ends, but the performance of the passing game overall. I mean, if you've got a legitimate threat there who merits attention, and again, I mean, there's more good timing. There's a picture of Kroll on the screen as we talk about him, and Tim Salem. Man, I synced this up well. If you're not watching the live stream, if you're only listening to the podcast, you're missing out because we've really got the photos. Look, another picture of Lucas Kroll catching a pass right there. Is that good? That's good. I think he can be really good. I think he can do a really good job in this offense, and I think he can earn and merit a lot of targets in Mark Whipple's offense. And I say that as someone who kind of bullish on Taysier Mack, kind of bullish on Shockey Jacques Louis, kind of bullish on Jared Wayne, and you've heard me talk about the freshman receivers before. So I like a lot of the pass catchers on this team. I think Lucas Kroll can be a big part of that. And I think Lucas Kroll can be a contributor, and really play well. I think if that happens, if you're Pitt, sort of the ideal scenario is if that happens and Lucas Kroll does play well and puts up some good numbers and really kind of shows what a tight end can do in this offense, it should help your recruiting overall at the tight end position. I think Pat Narduzzi was expecting that last year. I mean, he said it. He said it before, I think he had a press conference at the beginning of training camp, I want to say. And there was talk about tight ends, this or that, or what can Nakia Griffin-Stewart bring, or what's, you expect the tight ends to be more involved with Mark Whipple's offense. And he made a reference to the fact that they didn't have any tight end commitments at that time, or that, I forget. I think they might have already had Kai Wright on board. But he made a reference to something or other about tight ends, and he said, who knows, after they see how we use the tight ends this year, some guys might have different opinions on us, might get a little more interested, than they were otherwise. And of course, that didn't come to pass. That didn't come to pass at all. They didn't utilize the tight ends very well. They tried, and the tight ends didn't play very well, and it didn't exactly have much of an impact. But I think if they can get Kroll really going, that'll help them in their recruiting efforts with tight ends going forward. You know what I mean? Going into the 2022 class. And maybe even as they work to close up the 2021 class. They've got Trey Anderson on board. Maybe as they go through this season, if Lucas Kroll catches a bunch of passes, there might be a few of these tight end targets who are still out there because they've got 4 or 5 guys they're involved with, not necessarily in great shape, but they're involved with them. Maybe that's the little thing that pushes the interest in Pitt up. And then you get him on campus for an official visit, show him the film, and show him how great life can be at Pitt or something like that. Whatever official visits are supposed to do, and maybe you add add a second tight end to the class that way. So it'll be interesting to see what Kroll does this year, and then it'll be interesting to see how that maybe impacts the recruiting efforts once they move forward and start going after more tight ends. All right, let's jump into some of the questions here in the live chat, the comment section. We really appreciate everybody who's watching the podcast, watching the live stream tonight. Bunch of questions right off the bat about Trey Anderson. Jason Martell starts it off. Is Trey Anderson one of the most random recruits in recent memory? Happy to have him, and hopefully he can take an official visit sooner rather than later, given this COVID madness. Well, Jason, on Trey Anderson's official visit, that's going to happen after November. His mission trip ends in November, so he's going to be, coming to campus for an official visit maybe in late November or early December, sometime before signing day. But his plan is to sign in mid-December and then enroll in January. So he's going to try and get on campus as soon as he can. Right now, the dead period extended through, I think, the end of August, right? He wouldn't be able to take his visit then anyway. He's still going to be in California serving his mission trip. So that's not that's not an issue. But I agree that hopefully some of the recruiting restrictions are lifted by the time we get to the end of November. Nothing is guaranteed, of course. We will talk a little bit more about the prospects for this season and recruiting and that kind of thing in a little bit. Is he one of the most random recruits in recent memory, Jason? Trying to think if there was a more random recruit. Ricky Town came out of nowhere. Ricky Town, I mean, he didn't do anything while he was here, but I mean, that guy really came out of nowhere. He would be one that I would say was a random recruit. I mean, we didn't even know that Pitt was involved at all. We had no idea. And all of a sudden it turns out, I mean, they wouldn't even know he was visiting. And all of a sudden they get a commitment and it turns out it's Ricky Town. So what? So he would be up there, but, we at least knew of Trey Anderson. We knew of his name. But I definitely think when you get into the story of how he ends up at Pitt, I mean, Ricky Town ended up being random when we look back at, Ricky Town ended up being random in terms of kind of coming out of nowhere. But he was a JUCO quarterback. They needed somebody to come in, somebody older and more experienced. Steve Mushagan is out there as the coach there. He's got connections to Pitt. So, I mean, it's not entirely random. This Trey Anderson is a kid who's from Utah. And Josh Newark pointed out, is Trey Anderson the first recruit Pitt has ever gotten from Utah? First I can think of off the top of my head. I'm going to have to research that a little bit. But he's from Utah, but he's not even living in Utah. He's living in California where he hasn't been playing football for the last year and a half. It doesn't get much more random than that. Kind of out of nowhere type of thing. So, yeah, is he the most random recruit in recent memory? He's up there, Jason. He's up there. Joshua Lobig says, two things. I heard some interesting rumors today about Naquan Brown and his standing with Virginia Tech. Do you have any info on how hard they're recruiting him? Also glad you got to get on vacation the other week. Welcome back. Thanks, Josh. And we were back last week. Josh, you Lobig. I don't know where you were, but I was back last week, so hopefully you've been checking that out. Naquan Brown, 4-star defensive end out of Virginia. Big time as far as a prospect goes, and certainly somebody that Pitt's been after quite a bit. They've got Chris Beatty working on him. He's got a top 6. Pitt's in it. I think Penn State is in it. Virginia Tech is in it. LSU is in it. And he's announcing his commitment on Wednesday, on July 1st. And it seems, I don't know what his standing is with Virginia Tech. Donald Dell follows up and says, I've heard Virginia Tech is barely even communicating with him, but would accept his commitment, not pushing for it, though. Wonder if Chris has heard anything similar. A little bit, and Adam Vinchik, I guess is your name. I apologize if I got that wrong, but he says, any chance of landing Naquan Brown? I don't think Pitt's going to get Naquan Brown. It's not my expectation. It sounds like he'll probably be at LSU, or at least be committed to LSU. It's a situation that Pitt will probably monitor over the next 6 months, heading into signing day in December. 5 months, I guess it is now. You would really, as you would count it, and potentially someone that Pitt could double back on and end up landing late in the process. We're going way down the road there, but I think it's I don't know. I think it's going to be an interesting situation to watch. Like I say, I don't think he's going to commit to Pitt on Wednesday. I think he's going to commit to LSU. We'll see. This podcast could be dated very quickly since it'll come out a few hours before he announces his commitment. But that's my expectation. But I also expect Chris Beatty to keep in contact with him. He's teammates with Miles Alston, who's committed to Pitt. So I mean, there's a connection there. And I would expect those guys to keep working on Naquan Brown and see if they can land him and convince him to maybe flip to Pitt, or if he comes available again, something goes wrong with his commitment to LSU or whoever he ends up committed to. If things go awry or go astray late in the process, we'll see if Pitt can get back involved. I think they'll stay involved with him and then see where it goes from here. Let's see what else we got. Nicholas Timperio says, love the numbers of recruits and filling positions in need, but can't help feeling a little disappointed in the ratings overall. Was hoping for a little upgrade and a few more 4-star recruits. Well, Nicholas, let's take a look at the recruiting class. All right, let's bring it up. Pitt's commitment class. Trey Anderson, as a 2021 recruit, is not rated yet, so he has 0 stars. So Pitt, with 18 commitments, they're currently ranked number 21 in the country. And, part of that is going to be due to the volume. When you have 18 commitments, volume helps. I think if you look down the list, Nakai Johnson is a 4-star recruit right now. That's where he should be. He's the best recruit in the class. He's really good, and I think he'll stay at 4 stars. I really don't see him dropping down. Malik Newton is really interesting, the running back out of Virginia. He's a big power back. He's been the best player in his area for a couple years running now. He's a chance to be a 3-time player MVP of the area. I think he's really good. He had a really good offer sheet. I think it was a big score for Pitt, and he's the guy they're going to have to work hard to hold on to. He's currently a 5.7 4-star recruit, and that's sort of the high end of the 4-star scale. If you get to 5.8, which is where Nakai Johnson is, then you get to 4 stars. I'm sorry, 5.7 is the high end of the 3-star scale. You get up one point more to 5.8, and you get into 4-star territory. That's where Malik Newton is. That's where Terrence Enos is, the offensive lineman from Detroit. Like, both of those guys have a chance. I think Newton, if he has a senior season that looks like his junior and sophomore years did, I think Newton will merit a move up. I think another guy who could really make a big jump is Khalil Anderson, the cornerback from Georgia, from Atlanta. He's only a 5.5 3-star, so he's lower on that 3-star scale. That's the lowest of a 3-star ranking, is 5.5 on the Rivals rating. I don't know if he's going to jump all the way to 4 stars, but I think he might merit it in terms of ability. He's really good. He's a physical corner. He's got a nose for the ball. He gets after it. He can make interceptions. He's a very good tackler. And, I wouldn't feel any hesitation about putting him in maybe the top 3 of recruits in this class, along with Nakai Johnson and Malik Newton. And I like some of these other guys too. But those 3, I think, are really, really good and have a chance to, I think they're all, in my opinion, 4-star caliber prospects. We'll see what Rivals ends up ranking them. But as time goes on, those rankings will change. Guys will get bumped up. Some guys will get bumped down. Ideally, nobody in Pitt's class will get bumped down. I would prefer that doesn't happen. I think they have a few guys that are underrated. I don't know if I really see anybody in the class right now that's overrated. But guys will get bumped up a little bit, and that'll affect the overall rankings. I think one thing that's obviously not going to help the ranking situation is if there's no season this fall. And again, we'll talk about that stuff later if we have time. I'm not going to go down that path just yet because we're just talking about recruiting stuff. But, I think you need guys like Malik Newton and Khalil Anderson and Terrence Enos and Brandon Honorable and Terrence Rango. I mean, and Miles Alston. You need these, and Jaden Bradley, especially Jaden Bradley, big wide receiver who I think has a ton of potential, but he really hasn't played much wide. He's played 1 year of wide receiver. You need these guys to have senior seasons so they can go out, show what they can do, and elevate, be elevated, get upgrades, ranking upgrades. Because I think they deserve it, but they're going to need to have big senior seasons. And then ideally go to like some of these all-star games if those things happen. But I think that's how you'll get it. There's some other, there are other high-star recruits that are out there, 4-star guys. Obviously, Elliot Donald, who tweeted on Monday or Tuesday, I lose track of my days, that he's thinking about committing soon. That would be a big one for Pitt. There's probably some other 4-stars there maybe, they're involved with under the table a little bit, or not under the table. I shouldn't say it that way. That's kind of got a negative connotation, but sort of behind the scenes that we're not really as tapped into. But I think your best chance for getting some more stars in this class is that the guys who are in the class now get bumped up, and that'll help the overall class ranking. Ricky the Dragon Kayak says, Kroll can have a big season, but we're really expecting a lot from someone who has like 9 career catches. A lot of people thought Chris Clark was the answer. Yeah, that's true. Lucas Kroll has, not a lot in the way of a resume. He's playing baseball. He's playing baseball like Arkansas before he went to Florida for a year. He actually went to JUCO and then he went to Florida for a year or two. And he was playing behind some really good tight ends at Florida. I think you look at the skill set, and then in talking to some of the people who were around spring camp, around the team, and got to watch spring camp and sort of really kind of see what the team was doing and see how he looked in live action. I mean, the reviews were all raves. I mean, there were a lot of rave reviews. And I think people were really optimistic about what Lucas Kroll could do. So, I mean, that's partly based on my opinion and my expectations. It's also partly based on what I've heard from people around the program, who are speaking honestly of what they think Kroll can do. I think the expectations are pretty high. TRR says, need to win more to land those 4-star recruits, and those empty yellow seats are a problem. One the administration never cared to ensure are filled. I'm pretty sure Pitt's administration wants to fill the seats. I would say, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Pitt's administration would like to have those yellow seats filled. I don't think anybody denies that attendance is a problem at these games. I don't think anybody denies that when you go to a Pitt game, your experience is going to be different than it is when you walk into a stadium when there's 112,000 people. I mean, it's a different experience. It's a different experience sitting in the press box. You sit in the stands. You stand on the sideline. It's a different experience. And one is sort of tangibly better than the other. I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, like, if you had the choice of playing in front of and being with 100,000 people or being with 40,000 people, I mean, at something like a sporting event, bigger crowd sounds like more fun, doesn't it? Maybe not right now. My heart's not really in it to make that case right now, just because crowds are a little bit scary. But that's what they want. They want you to be scared. That's something Pitt is always going to have to recruit against. I mean, as long as they play, and I was going to say as long as they play in a stadium that seats 68,000, they're always going to deal with the problem of empty seats. But you know what? You play in a smaller stadium. You build a stadium that's 50,000 or 48 or something like that. Even if you're at 88% capacity, your attendance can still be held against you because you're drawing 46,000 regularly, and it looks great because your stadium's almost full, but that's still less than half of some of the teams that you're competing against in recruiting. So it's always going to be held against you. And if you're a coach at Pitt, you have to recruit around it. You know what I mean? You have to. I've always said this is the sales pitch. All right, if you get guys that start talking about attendance, you feel like attendance is a big factor for a recruit. Here's what you say: you say, look, all right, numbers are what they are. 7 Saturdays a year, We're going to go out and play in front of that crowd, and we're going to have some diehards. We're going to have some fanatics. We're going to have some people who are really passionate about Pitt athletics, man, and they're going to have your back no matter what. Is the stadium going to be full? Well, we can, you can give some pep talk there. We can make it full. Players like you come in here, we will win enough games, we will fill that stadium. But what you really focus on is what happens the other 358 days out of the year. What are you doing the other 358 days that you're not those 7 Saturdays in the fall? Now, those 7 Saturdays are very important, but the other 358 days in the year, you show them the campus, you show them the education, you show them the academic support system, you show them the what it's like to be with the coaches, to live with your teammates, and all of those things, all the other things that define your life. If you're recruiting for Pitt and you feel like attendance is going to be an issue for a recruit you're after, you focus on those other 358 days of the year instead of those 7 where you're playing at Heinz Field. That's my what have you. That's my case, and I've said that for a long time. I've always said that's the way you recruit around in attendance. Let's see here. Richard Wendell says our high ranking in recruiting is pretty much related to number of commitments as opposed to quality. Yeah, I mean, that's true. Like I said, I mean, it's quantity is going to bump it up. It's a volume-based ranking system where points, you add up points. You get points for every commitment you have. They're cumulative. They pile up, and then that puts you in a better ranking position. Some of those guys, you want them to get bumped up in recruiting numbers or in recruiting rankings, and that's going to help your class. We'll see what's able to help them. What's able to happen with that. Now, that's that's another. Like I said, that's going to depend on whether or not they end up having a season, which will go a long way. Let's see. Other questions here. Richard Wendell. Wasn't Will Gibson out of nowhere? Not really. I mean, we knew about Will Gibson. You know what I mean? Will Gibson committed in November, got his offer, and then committed pretty shortly thereafter. But I mean, we knew about Will Gibson. He was a standout wide receiver at Aliquippa. He was He was at Pitt's prospect camp in June, and I mean, we knew about Will Gibson. He was not a surprise. Trey Anderson is somebody who kind of came out of nowhere for, in terms of kind of his background, where he comes from, being from Utah, being in California on a mission trip. I mean, that's a pretty unique set of circumstances. Now, Ricky the Dragon Kayak brings up Servassier Dennis when we're talking about random recruit. And yes, Servassier Dennis did come out of nowhere. He was on his official visit, and it took us everything we could do to figure out who the heck he was. That one was one that came out of nowhere. That's a good call on Servassier Dennis. TRR adds, Pitt's getting speed from the south, just need to be smart about who to redshirt. Quit blowing red shirts. I'm not really sure if that's been a problem, particularly since the NCAA changed the rule. I think they've actually been pretty good about the red shirts. There's some situations, it's, did A.J. Woods need to use his red shirt last year? Did Servassier Dennis need to use his red shirt last year? Did Brandon George need to use his red shirt last year? All right, so I'm not making my case if I said that I don't think they've had a problem with blowing red shirts. I do think they've been pretty good with red shirts. It's unfortunate in some of these situations. It's unfortunate that DeMar Hamlin had to petition the NCAA. It's unfortunate that he played when he did in 2016. It's unfortunate that Maurice French played. But you know what? You'll probably have guys every year where you say, wait, did they really need to play him? Did they really need to use his red shirt? I don't think that's a chronic problem with this staff. If I was going to make a list of the issues that I see with this staff right now, that probably wouldn't be on it. Don't ask me what that list is, but that probably would not be on it. Josh Newark, who's always on the live stream, we appreciate it, says, Peak, it is 9:05. You have forgotten to crack open a cold one. And Stephen Case adds in a Voodoo Ranger American Haze for me tonight. It's a great option, Stephen. You're right, Josh. I don't have a beer on this podcast here, but the Voodoo Ranger from New Belgium, their American Haze, outstanding. All of them. Liquid Paradise is another really good one. 1985 is a mango IPA. You got to find that one as well. So I highly recommend all of those. As always, the Voodoo Ranger from New Belgium are outstanding. They come up with different ones all the time, and they're some really tasty stuff. So go find some of that. New Belgium Voodoo Ranger. That's what I was drinking at the beach all week. Last week or 2 weeks ago. Wait. When did I get back from the beach? No, yeah, 2 weeks ago. It's hard to keep track, man. These weeks just get away. Let's see here. A little conversation in the comments section about Mac Brown, and yeah, UNC's recruiting really well. They got the number 1 cornerback in the country on Tuesday. So, and that's just continuing a run that they've been on. I mean, I think they have a top 10 recruiting class right now. I think they're number 7 or something in the Rivals rankings. Mac Brown's got it going. We'll see how well he can coach and all that stuff. But his recruiting's off the charts right now. Nicholas Temperio says no camps this year has also affected the recruits getting bumped up in the ratings. Wasn't complaining about recruiting, but hoping for a little better. That said, I trust Narduzzi's evaluation of talent. Yeah, it's a good point about the camps too. There's the whole Rivals camp series, where camps throughout the country in the spring, and they all get canceled. And a lot of the colleges would hold recruiting camps and prospect camps, and that would be another chance for these guys to get seen. And I think you would have seen more ratings adjustments than what we got, but it just didn't happen because the camps didn't happen. And so it took away some opportunities for exposure. And not only did it take away opportunities for the recruits to get ranking bumps, it took away a lot of opportunities for recruits to get new offers. Now, Pitt keeps offering guys, other schools keep offering players, but if you had a chance to go out to these satellite camps or go out to these prospect camps, or I guess maybe they're not called satellite camps anymore, but the camps that they have where one school will host it and a lot of other college coaches come to it, these kind of prospect camps, you get seen by a lot of coaches and you get a lot of offers that way. And Pitt has offered a lot of guys and gotten commitments from a lot of guys that way. And that just didn't happen this year. And I think it definitely had a negative impact on recruits. I mean, coaches are finding new guys to offer, but for a lot of them are just going back and looking at the same old film that they have looked at 10 times already. And this, on the 11th time, they say, you know what? I think he can play for us. That's what recruiting is these days. Coaches don't have anything to do, so they're just sitting around looking at film all day. Royce Beacom asks, is Bobby Maxwell Black the last linebacker in the class? In spite of the linebackers from last year, will they be leaving a spot open for exceptional linebackers? Yeah, I think they would take another linebacker. They've got 2 commitments right now, Maxwell Black and Preston Levant, 2 guys from the South, two good linebacker prospects. I think if they can get a third good one, I think they will. TRR asks, should we feel good about the younger O-linemen in the pipeline? I think there's some good young prospects in this offensive line. The guy I keep hearing about is Matt Gonsalves. Or Matt Gonsalves. I apologize if I butchered his name, which I think I did quite a bit when he was getting recruited. I keep hearing a lot about him, that he's going to be a really good offensive tackle for this team. Leon Moore 23 asks about Jake Cradle. You think he'll win do you think he will win a starting spot? I don't know if he's going to win a starting spot, but I think he's got a couple years ahead of him. Just playing as a redshirt freshman last year, so he's got 3 more years. I think the future is bright for him. I think Blake Zabovic still looks like a good prospect. I think you got the possibility of a defensive lineman moving over there that could help. I kind of like these guys coming in, Branson Taylor and Michael Statham. I think they're both really big. And I think this class that they have this year of Terrence Enos and Brandon Honorable and Terrence Rankle and Marco Fugara, the guard, potentially center. I think that's a good group. I like some of these younger linemen, but what's most important is getting the guys this year to play well so that the staff can stay in place long enough for all the younger linemen to have a chance to play. I don't mean to be kind of morbid about it like that or cynical about it like that, but I mean, that's the reality. Guys on the current team, 2020, 2021 need to play well so that those guys that Pitt is recruiting, and they've been recruiting the last couple of years, are going to be able to come in and play for, these coaches. Adam Vinchik asked, when do you see Elliot Donald committing? I don't know. He said thinking about committing soon. I don't have any details or info beyond that. I know, we were always kind of under the impression that he wanted to take some official visits before he committed. Maybe with the recruiting dead period extended through the end of the summer, maybe he's started to think a little differently on that. Maybe he'll move it up a little bit and potentially in the near future. That would be a big one for Pitt to get. No question about it. And then Matt Sobel asks, do you see a lot of decommitments nationwide since so many commitments happened without official visits? And, Matt, we've talked about that a few times, and I apologize if it's Sable. I'm going to call you Sobel. No, I should call you Sable. I've talked about that a few times, and I really don't. I don't think there will be a surge. There may end up being more decommitments just in numbers, the sheer volume. But I think percentage-wise, I don't know if it'll. I think it might be even less, like a lower percentage of the current commitments might decommit than what you've seen in previous years. And the reason why is because so many of those guys committed without taking official visits. They didn't take official visits to Pitt. None of these recruits did. So that means in December, the Pitt staff is going to be able to get them all on campus for official visits. Now, they may go visit some other schools, but in the past, you get guys on campus in June, you give them an official visit, they have an amazing time, they commit, and then in December, another school wants to get them on campus, they go take an official visit, it's amazing, and Pitt has no sort of retort, if you will. Now, say one of the guys in this recruiting class wants to go take a visit somewhere at the end of November. You don't have to like it, but it's going to happen. Well, you've got a chance now. You got a couple weekends before signing day where you can bring him back to Pitt for an official visit and show him a great time, and he can really enjoy himself and remember why he committed to Pitt in the first place. And so I think it'll actually help them hold on to guys. Now, this is just my theory. We'll see what actually happens. But that's just my theory on how it's going to play out. Hey, listen, if you're here on the live stream, hit like on the video is cool, but subscribe to the Panther-Lair YouTube page. All right, we're always trying to run those numbers up. Subscribe to Panther-Lair.com on YouTube. You should also check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, we have message boards where all night tonight we've been talking about Trey Anderson, new tight end commitment. And we talk about recruiting and football and basketball all the time. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Just got a new subscriber to the YouTube page just now. Thank you, Mojo12582. We appreciate it, man. Everybody, go subscribe to the Panther-Lair YouTube page. That's what we want to see. And then check out the website, Panther-Lair.com. One more question came in here. Josh Newark asked, will the NCAA have to adjust the early signing day because of no official visits during the summer? I kind of think they should, Josh. I don't know if they will, but I think they should, because I feel like, the two go hand in hand, the early signing period and the early official visit period. And if you don't have the early official visit period, I don't know if you can have the early signing period. But the NCAA, you never really can predict what they're going to do. I like everybody liking the video. Make sure you go and subscribe on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm going to try and figure out a way to get a button on this video so you can just click it while you're watching the live stream. But everybody go subscribe to that. We really appreciate it. Check out the website, Panther-Lair.com. Of course, get some New Ranger. I keep messing that up. Get some New Belgium, Voodoo Ranger. Go find any of their Voodoo Rangers. You'll enjoy it. It's awesome. New Belgium is awesome. Voodoo Ranger is awesome. All of their Voodoo Ranger varieties. Remember, we'll have the Conversation podcast later in the week on Friday. We have the Panthers Insider Show on Saturday morning at 8 a.m. on 93.7 The Fan. And then, of course, every Tuesday night, we're right here, 8:30 p.m., youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com for the live stream of the podcast. Jump in, have a conversation like we did tonight. I'll talk for a little bit, and then we'll all hang out and talk a little bit about Pitt sports. If you like Pitt sports, this is the place you need to be. Thanks for everybody who chimed in the live stream tonight. It was great having the conversation with you. Thanks everybody listening to the podcast later on. We'll see you on the message boards, and have a great week.